Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the Princeton Reviews webinar, SAT strategy session, last minute tips for the May SAT. My name is Lindsay, and I'm here with our expert presenter, Annalisa. Before we get started, I just want to let you know everyone's lines are on mute. So if you have any questions or any issues at any time, please feel free to use the questions box in your webinar panel on the right-hand side. We'll save some questions, save some time for questions at the end of our presentation, but feel free to submit questions as you have them in that panel. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Annalisa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Annalisa Medina. I am the Outreach Manager for San Antonio, Austin, and South Texas. And it is my pleasure to share with you strategies about the SAT tonight. What we're going to talk about is what is the SAT. We're going to look at some strategies and sample problems. And then we're going to talk about how the Princeton Review can help you particularly. So what is the SAT? Well, the SAT is an admissions test that's provided to colleges to give some broad information. Admission tests are kind of like clothing on a first date. So it gives you a quick picture of the person, but it's not 100% accurate. It's just one point of view. But the better the initial impression is, the better the chance that you have. The SAT is offered 7 times in the months of March, May, which we have the May SAT coming up, June, August, October, November, and December. And it costs $46 or $60 with the essay, which we're going to talk about a little bit in detail. The duration is 3 hours and 50 minutes with the essay. And the average score is a 1090. And that number was taken from the last reported mean, concorded to a new score. So let's look at what the SAT measures. We're just going to take a little quiz here. So does the SAT measure intelligence? Nope, it does not measure intelligence. How well you do on this test does not reflect how smart you are or how creative you are. What it measures is how well you can take an SAT or ACT. Can the SAT be used to award aid? Yes, it can. Great scores can be used to award merit aid, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on. Does the SAT reflect your GPA in high school? Nope, does not reflect your GPA in high school. Your GPA is more important for admissions counselors. Your high school transcript is what reflects your GPA in high school. And that reveals your academic work that you've completed from your freshman year all the way to your senior years. Can it predict your GPA in college? Nope, not at all. It's not going to predict how well you do in college. You are the best predictor of how well you're going to do in college. Can it be prepared for? Absolutely. With proper coaching, you can increase your score dramatically, provided that you do the work and that you put in the work. Should it be prepared for? Yep, absolutely. Test scores are still heavily relied upon, and you should do some sort of preparation based upon your goals. Does the SAT measure what you've learned so far in high school? Question mark. It's kind of a question mark. There is some content that you have seen before in your high school, but there's going to be some other content that you haven't seen in your coursework so far. So that's a question mark. So now that we've talked about what the SAT measures, let's talk about how it's scored. There's 2 sections for the SAT. There's the math, and then there's evidence-based reading and writing. And each section is scored between 200 and 800 points for a composite score of 400 to 600. You may notice on your score report that there are some other scores or there's some cross-test scores. That data is really intended for the high schools to assess college readiness and course advisement. But when anyone asks you what your SAT score is, they're asking for this range, 400 to 1600. So what is a good SAT score? I get this question all the time. And really the answer is, it depends. And I know that that's just really a broad answer, but it depends on you. It depends on your top school choice. It depends on your goals, and it depends on what you need for that particular score. So in your research of your top schools, find out what the minimum SAT score is, and look at all those necessary elements that you need. So for some students, it may be a 1090 is a great score for them. Other students, it may be a 1360. So we talked about a little bit about minimum score, SAT scores, and we've talked about, when we answered the question, can it be used to award merit aid? And I just want to point out this slide here. When we talked about the SAT score, when I said, well, it depends. So if you kind of look at Santa Clara University, 1380 score, average merit award, approximately 18,000. Well, then when you look at St. Louis University, a score of 1070, approximately $16,794. And that's not saying that that is set in stone. This is just an example based on past data, but it would be at least the minimum score for the scholarship. That comes in your research. And when I mentioned about researching your colleges and having those conversations with the admissions representative, this would be a question that that you would want answered. What, the score for merit aid and admission as well. So let's talk about what is on the SAT. And I'm not going to go line by line, question by question here, but there are two things that I would really like to point out to you. One is the math section. So there's a math section that you will not be able to use a calculator, and that's 20 questions. And then there's the math that you'll be able to use with a calculator, and that's 38 questions. So there's two sections of math, one with calculator, one without. The other aspect I would like to point out is the essay. And I mentioned earlier about the essays optional. What I'd like to point out is that if in your research you discover that the school that you're applying to does not require the essay, and then you decide and you do not take the essay on the SAT, you decide to change and apply to another school, and that school does require the essay, you're going to have to take the SAT all over again, because you can't just take the essay portion on a particular SAT. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the essay is your best way to show your raw writing skills. When you submit a goal statement or statement of intent, or the essay you submit with your application, you're submitting a polished piece of work. Whereas the essay on your SAT is a raw writing sample, and that was just part of presenting yourself and who you are. So let's just look real briefly at the difference between the ACT. And the ACT, if you notice in the format, the ACT is exclusively multiple choice. And I mentioned about the math without calculator, but also there's mostly multiple choice in the SAT. And if you notice here in the content areas, there's an added content area in the ACT. There's a science component added to the ACT. Scoring is a little different, but it has their own scoring system, as well as if you notice the difference between the timing and the number of questions. Because the ACT is more straightforward, you have less time with more questions, whereas the SAT, you have a little bit extra time with less questions there. So preparation and planning are key. I'd like for you to think about this, your quest here, as in running a marathon. So if you were to get up and run a marathon today, or if you had the intent to run a marathon, there would be some key components to your preparation. It would require pacing, it would require strategy, practice, learning, endurance. It would be endurance. And so I would like for you to think about this in the context of running a marathon and what that requires. So the SAT requires testing savvy. And I'm going to point out two examples to you about being savvy when you're taking a test. And what savvy means is knowing what is being asked, knowing the content, and developing an understanding of the test. So let's look at these two examples here. Well-written tests do not allow for this type of ambiguity of questions. Wouldn't it be awesome if these were test questions on the SAT? Well, I would sure hope that Hope got some questions right, because it asked for name the quadrilateral, and Hope named it Bob. She answered the question. Or find X. This student answered the question. Here it is. Here is X. The SAT writers, they would never put these types of questions on because they're ambiguous. And they know how important it is for people to understand that it's very specific. They also know about that people are predictable. These tests are written by highly paid people that write questions to mislead you so that you get the questions wrong. They know which wrong answer choices you'll like because high school students are predictable. And I'm just going to give you an example of how predictable we are. So I would like for you to pick a number. Okay, you got it? All right, great. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Whose number is over 5,000? How about over 1,000? 100 to 500? What about a fraction or decimal? But I bet I can guess that your number is anywhere between 1 and 10. I can kind of see your hands going up, right? Just kidding, I can't see you. Even though I gave you a broad question, I know that I can funnel your answer down to a smaller scale. And the people that write the PSAT, SAT, and ACT, they know that as well. And so they know that you're predictable, that we are predictable, not just you. We are all predictable, and that they know which answers you're going to answer. So we know about predictability, that we're predictable, but we're going to teach some strategies here of how to tackle that and what to look for. So one of our strategies that we teach is pacing. And I'm not going to go into line by line here, but I do want to point out an example, reading. There are 52 questions in the reading section. There's 65 minutes for this section with an average time per question of 75 seconds. That's where this pacing comes in, and learning about pacing and pacing yourself. So to slow down and focus. So normally you get dinged for wrong answers when you take a test in school. But these tests, you add up the correct answers. So there's no penalty for wrong answers. They're only adding up your correct answers. So we're going to look at another example of pacing here. So if you remember our friend from elementary school, the tortoise and the hare. Well, our tortoise is fast and furious tortoise attempted 58 questions. He got 26 correct and 32 incorrect. So for a score of 540. But our tortoise, slow and steady and precise, focused on looking through the section, answering the questions that she knew that she could get correct. Remember that whole pacing per question. So going through, answering the questions that she knew that she would get correct. And then now that she has time left over, going back and remembering that you are not penalized for wrong answers. So what our tortoise did, she only attempted 38, as opposed to our hare with 58. 30 correct for a score of 580. But when she went back and she guessed, not suggesting that you guess throughout the entire time, but guess 20 guesses. So she got an extra 4 questions correct for a score of 610. So that pacing strategy, focusing on what she knew correctly, and then going back and answering the question, it made a huge difference by just answering some extra questions and pacing herself. So we talked about a strategy, and then the right prep makes all the difference in the world. So good test prep teaches a couple of things: familiarity with the test, common traps and how to avoid them, and confidence, because you build your confidence as you know that you have these answers correct and that you know what you're looking for. Some of the common mistakes that we find are answering questions too quickly, like our hair, our friend the hair, careless errors, doing work in your head, misreading the problem, or you just don't understand what to do. So we're going to attack this problem. We're going to look at this problem. And initially, it looks a little overwhelming. There's a lot of information here, and there's a lot of numbers on here. But we're going to implement a strategy called bite-sized pieces. So we're just going to look at what information do we need to find. Okay, we need, oh, let's read this real quick. Sorry about that. Samantha is looking to join a judo dojo. It's also a tongue twister, by the way. The dojo charges a one-time membership fee of $129.99 and an additional $7 fee per session. A tax of 13% is applied to the membership fee, but not the sessional fee. Which of the following represents Samantha's total cost in dollars for attending N sessions? So I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but what information do you need to find? Total cost in dollars for attending N sessions. Samantha's total cost. And what information do we have? We know that the one-time membership fee of $129.99, additional $7 fee per session, and 13% tax on membership not added to the session. So one of our strategies is bite-sized pieces. The other strategy we're going to implement within the same problem is process of elimination. So we don't necessarily have to go find the correct answer. We have to eliminate the incorrect answers. So how many times does she pay $129.99? So we know that that is not B because she only pays $129.99 one time. What's the tax on? So we know it's not A because the tax is applied to the membership fee and not the sessional fee. So we ruled that answer out. So now what's the difference between C and D? And we ruled out C because it's not a sum of everything. It is D, the $129.99 and the 13% tax on that. So if you notice, we use two strategies within one problem, and we didn't really necessarily have to figure out the answer to that. We just had to figure out the problem that we could later on answer if we needed to. So that initially looks a little overwhelming, but once we break it down in strategy and we pace ourselves, we can get the correct answer. So we talked a little bit about how to prep. Now let's look at when to prep. And so if you're a sophomore, ideally you would want to prep between your summer, the summer before your junior year, so between sophomore and junior year. And I'm going to run through this a little quickly, but just to show you, we do know that junior year, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of extracurricular activities. There is tests going on. You're applying to schools. There's just a lot going on. So ideally, if you could prep between your summer, prep in the summer between your sophomore and junior year, ideally 6 to 12 weeks before you take the actual test. So I'm going to run through this, but if you notice, the prep is suggested 6 to 12 weeks before the actual test. And that helps with it being fresh in your mind and learning the strategies, implementing those strategies right before you take the official test. So if you're already a junior, there's still time, but we would like for you to prep as early as possible. Again, keeping in mind the 6 to 12 weeks in advance of the actual test. And when you speak with one of our expert advisors at a later time, you can review with them specifically your goals, your ambition, where you're at right now, and when you need to take the actual test. So we spent a lot of time talking about the ACT and SAT and looking at some strategies. And I just want you to remember that that's just one piece of the puzzle. It's not one or the other. It's all three things working in conjunction together. So getting into your dream schools includes 3 key elements. So better grades. Not only are we focused on your SAT score or your ACT score, we also want you to get great grades. We have a service called Homework Help that we can share more information with. We can have that emailed to you, where we help with your homework. So not only you focus on your test preparation, but you're also focused on getting great grades while you're still in school right now. And better scores, test prep. We've talked about the test prep and the better scores and the different options for you, as well as better schools. And what I mean by that is we have experts to help you with your admissions applications, creating a great application to get into those great schools. And I want you to remember that the Princeton Review is here with you every step of the way. We have been helping students improve standardized test scores for more than 30 years. So we've taken them to the tests that require the skill and something that they can learn about as well. We also have options for every budget, every schedule, and for every learning type. So it may be taking a class is the best option for you, or buying a prep book, or maybe self-prep online, or if you want to take a practice test. If you take a practice test, it would give you a good indicator if you took the test today where you would score, and when you meet with one of our expert advisors, they can review your scores with you, review your timeline, and review what your score that you need to increase. That may be taking a class, either online or in person. It may be, or maybe working with a private tutor. It just really depends, but I want to point out, and just to let you know and reassure you, that there's prep for every style and for every budget. And if you're still interested in taking the preparation for the May 5th SAT test, I want you to know it's not too late. There's still time for you. We have what's called an SAT cram course, and it features 6 hours of live online instruction. Well, you're going to get to review SAT strategies and concepts that will help you boost your confidence for that testing. And if you're interested in learning more information, we'll definitely share that with you. I want to remind you as well that we are here to help you every step of the way. And if that is something that you're interested in, if you would like to speak, if you would like a consultation with one of our expert advisors, please indicate that by answering the poll on your screen right now, and we would be happy to put you in touch with someone. So I want to thank you for your time tonight. I want to thank you for spending energy and time on yourself and learning some more strategies. And we would be happy to put you in touch with one of our expert advisors to speak with you and your family about your individual need, your school, and what you need so that we could help you get into your dream school. Again, my name is Annalisa Medina, and thank you for your time, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Annalisa. Hey guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them our way by using the questions box in your webinar panel. If we don't get to all your questions tonight, or if you think of a question later, you can go ahead and email us at any time at questions@review.com. Just so you know, this webinar is recorded, so if you came in late, you can view the full webinar tomorrow on our website, along with all of our other webinars. Just go to princetonreview.com/webinars. And so we'll stay on the line here for a few minutes waiting for some questions to come in. Otherwise, have a great night, and thank you so much for joining. Annalisa, looks like we might have a shy crowd tonight.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, wait. We've got one question. What are the types of essays you might see in the essay section?
One is could possibly be for and against, like an example that I'm thinking of right now is Athletic scholarships is one that I've seen. So are you for, proving your point of why students should be awarded athletic scholarships, or why they should not be awarded scholarships as well? Kind of a for and against stance on that.
Any other questions tonight, folks? All right, Annalisa. Well, again, guys, if you have any questions at all, you can email us at questions@review.com. And have a great night.
Thank you. Have a great night.